Welcome to the Loft. I'm C64Woody, or Woody for short. If you're new here, click the subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss on any uploads. I upload every single Friday. The response to last week's video has been amazing. I'm hearing from so many people that they're sharing it with their friends and family, people they know that are on the spectrum, and people that are parents of those on the spectrum or have sensory issues, and it's just been amazing. And that's really what it's all about. That's why I made the video, was to start the conversation. And this week we're going to keep the conversation going, and we're going to add a new element, my faith. I'm going to talk a little bit about my faith and how my dyspraxia and autism shaped the expression of my faith, the challenges it's faced because of the dyspraxia and autism, but not just the difficulties. The joys also, the hope I have because I realized I'm not broken or disordered. I'm specifically designed to help draw some parallels. I want to share the story of Saint Joseph of Cupertino. Joseph was born in the village of Cupertino, part of the Kingdom of Naples at the time, which is now part of modern-day Italy. His father had left the family in severe debt before his death, or upon his death, and all of this happened before Joseph was even born. So Joseph's mother was forced to give birth to him in a stable because their family was so deep in debt that essentially they were foreclosed on. Their house was taken. Joseph began to experience ecstatic visions as a child, or as some called ecstasies, which were to continue throughout his life and made him the subject of scorn. He was made fun of quite a lot, as many on the spectrum are, and many who deal with dyspraxia are mocked as children. I certainly had my share of it, although I didn't have visions that I can remember. His life was not helped by the frequent outbursts of anger. Lord knows I had plenty of those as a child, my meltdowns. And of course, since I didn't know what the meltdowns were about or what was causing them, that made it even more difficult. His uncle found him a position as an apprentice to a shoemaker, a cobbler. But that was not to last. He sensed a calling on his life to enter a religious order. So he went to the ministry. In 1620, he applied to the conventual Franciscan friars, but he was rejected due to his lack of education. He came from a poor family, so he didn't have a formal education. He then applied to the Capuchin friars in Martino, near Taranto, I guess. I'm not Italian. By whom he was accepted. They took him in as a lay brother, and he was later dismissed as his continued ecstasies or ecstatic visions made him unfit for the duties required of him. So he wasn't able to do the tasks that they wanted him to do because he was so lost in his own thoughts and his ecstasies. And in case you're wondering what the ecstasies looked like, I'll switch to camera here right quick and kind of give you an idea. They probably looked like this. So Joseph was forced to return to his family in shame and scorn, and then he pleaded with the Franciscan friars that had rejected him earlier, just to, there was a convent there near Cupertino, and he begged them to take him in, and just to be allowed to serve in their stables. After several years of working there, he had so impressed the friars with the devotion and simplicity of his life that he was admitted to their order. He became a Franciscan monk. Destined to become a Catholic priest in 1625, he was ordained a priest on the 20th of March in 1628. He was then sent to Madonna del Grazie, or Grazi, Gravina in Puglia, I guess. I should have practiced these names first, where he spent the next 15 years. So, yeah, he was destined to become a priest at that point. Now, there is an adaptation of this legend, or of his story, that says that it was his mother that actually went to the Franciscans at this point and begged them to take him back in because she couldn't really deal with him anymore. Didn't want to, and just couldn't afford to keep him at the house. After this point, the occasions of ecstasy in Joseph's life began to multiply. It was claimed that he began to levitate while he started to float while participating in the Mass or the Eucharist, the Holy Communion, or joining the community for the divine office, daily prayer, thereby gaining a widespread. So he would have these ecstasies in the middle of saying Mass, or in the middle of daily prayer. It just it hit when it hit, thereby gaining a widespread reputation of holiness among the people in the region and beyond. He was deemed disruptive, though, by his religious superiors and church authorities, so his bishop and on up thought he was causing trouble. And eventually, he was confined to a small cell, forbidden from joining in any public gatherings of the community. He was put into quarantine. As the phenomenon of flying or levitation was widely believed to be connected to witchcraft, Joseph was denounced by the Inquisition. They didn't like him. At their command, he was transferred from one Franciscan friary in the region to another for observation. So he was moved from one the friary is similar to an abbey or where monks live, where the friars lived. First to Assisi. He was there from 1639 to 1653, then briefly to, I'm not even going to attempt to say that one. Well, I guess I'll try it. Pietraurubio, I guess. And finally, Fossombrone, where he lived with and under the supervision of the Capuchin friars. He practiced a severe asceticism throughout his life, usually eating solid food only twice a week and adding bitter powders to his meals. He passed 35 years of his life following this regimen. So he lived for 35 years this way. Talk about dedication. Finally, on July 9th of 1657, Joseph was allowed to return to the conventual community, being sent there to the one in Osimo, where he soon died, sadly. Joseph was beatified in 1753 and canonized in 1767. Excuse me. So Saint Joseph of Cupertino is considered the patron saint of pilots, of astronauts, for obvious reasons, the levitation, the flying, and of students, because of one story that I actually didn't mention, but I'll mention now. When he was studying to become a priest, the process was very different than what we have now. But similar to a certain degree. But he had an oral exam. And, since he was considered dull-witted and slow, he was not considered very intelligent, partly due to his lack of education, but also probably because he was on the spectrum, most likely, and most likely dyspraxic. He was known to be clumsy. He had trouble retaining information. He was considered, partly because he was considered slow. So the oral exam, he found it difficult to study, but he memorized one section of scripture. And supposedly with the test, they would ask you a random one for you to, they would name it, but it was always random. It was never the same. And they got to him, and the one that they asked him to do just so happened to be the one that he had memorized years prior and had stayed with him. So every test that they gave him, that seemed to be the norm. And so to this day, he is considered the patron saint of students. And in fact, there is a prayer of St. Joseph of Cupertino for test takers, inspired by this story. And I'm going to drop links about St. Joseph in the description, so feel free to check out his story. So let's talk about some of the parallels. Much like Joseph, I have at times felt rejected or abandoned, really. And my situation and his were very different. When I was a teenager, my parents sent me to a boarding school for several reasons. My mom was working at a job that may have had us move to a different state by the end of it. And she may have had an opportunity to move laterally from that position to another, which would force our family to move. In this way, my education wouldn't be disrupted. I would just be going home to a different home. And we chose this school because the school where I had done ninth grade just was not a good fit. It just wasn't going to work. But this school, this boarding school, was a good fit, ultimately. But there's also the added situation of my parents were, I'm the youngest of three by a lot. My brother is 9 years older than me. So by the time I came along, they're tired, they're exhausted, and they're having to deal with a teenager that has learning issues. So, in some ways, I kind of feel like Joseph, that I was not dumped, but my parents put me in this school because they didn't really have the resources or the energy to deal with my stuff, so they passed me on to someone who could. Now, I don't know if Joseph's family stayed involved after he was accepted by the Franciscans, but my family certainly stayed involved with me while I was at that school, and even came to, they came to my graduation. The girl that I was dating at the time, they paid for her to come to my graduation. So yeah, so it wasn't an actual abandonment, but I was a sensitive kid. It planted in me unconscious or subconscious feelings of abandonment that I didn't really wrestle with until much later in adulthood, still wrestling with, but I am well past the anger of all of it. I had to deal with the anger. There was an anger that I didn't even realize was there, but it was there. And so yeah, it hurt. And it's probably going to be stuff that I deal with for the rest of my life. And I've talked to my family about this, and we've worked through it. I don't blame anybody. It's just the nature of the beast. Also, like Joseph, one of the key places I find solace is in the church, despite some within the church not wanting to deal with him or me. I was the kid while watching Disney's The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I saw Quasimodo. He got to live in the church and ring the bells, and I thought, how can I get that gig? I still love the ringing of church bells and the playing of pipe organ music. It's a lot of, I go into almost an ecstasy. It ASMRs me, I suppose. Ha ha ha. Anyway, I thought, how can I get that gig? How can I do that? The church is one place where I always feel loved and accepted by God, even if others there don't get me. And honestly, as long as God gets me, who cares? So, a little bit about my background. I was raised in the Baptist church, and which is not a very liturgical church. I'm Anglican now. I'm fairly high church, almost Catholic, in my style of worship and my what I appreciate in liturgy. But I was raised Baptist. And it created some, within me, some difficulties. When I was in youth group, this was in the 90s and early 2000s. So within the Baptist church here in the U.S., the Southern Baptist especially, it was, the big push for individual personal quiet times. You would read the Bible, pray in private. And it was whatever you wanted to make of it. It was your time with God, so you did what worked best for you. It was all about the individual, which is fine. We all need our individual times with God if we're people of faith. But it's called a quiet time. So you would get alone with God, which I'm like, okay, that sounds great. I like that idea. How do I do it? This what I would ask as a kid. And it was always, well, you pray, you read the Bible, if you need to fall asleep with God, that's fine. It's just, okay, when do I do it? Well, you can do it in the morning or at lunch or whenever you have time with God. Like, okay, but if it's that non-structured, I'm not going to do it. And I would keep asking, okay, all of these sound great, but how? And granted, I wouldn't always ask these out loud, because I felt like, well, okay, no one else is asking this question. Maybe this is something that we should all just know. So I stayed quiet. Well, years later, I discovered liturgy. I discovered Anglicanism and liturgy through the boarding school, actually. And over time, as I've incorporated that more and more into my life to the point where now that is how I worship, liturgy has given me so much. It gave me the structure for my prayer life that I needed. There's the daily office. If you look in your average Anglican Episcopal Book of Common Prayer, there's a daily office. There's morning prayer, noonday prayer, evening prayer, Compline, which is for when you go to bed. And it's based on the Liturgy of the Hours, and which comes from the monastery and abbey system, where the monks prayed every hour, every part of the day. They had a time where they stopped and prayed. So it gave me a structure, and it with it being written prayers, it gave me a language. It gave me a script to use to approach God. While, I'm approaching the creator of the universe, the awesome, all-powerful God, who is the king of the universe and also happens to be my daddy. So it gave me a way to approach both simultaneously, which helped me immensely. It, reinvigorated my prayer life. And on top of that, participating in the liturgy every Sunday, I served as an altar server in the church that Mrs. Woody and I go to now. And I'll even drop a link to their website in the description because we helped plant it. But working within that and serving as an altar server is really the head altar server. I would serve at the altar, and I would be part of the procession and the whole liturgy and the whole Eucharist service. I had roles. Well, being someone who struggles with movement and body spatial awareness, being a part of the liturgy helped me. It helped me know what to do with my body. Every movement was deliberate and specific and had a divine purpose. It was fantastic. It was amazing. I'm like, oh my gosh, through the church and through liturgy, I know how to control my body. So it's through that happened. So I get Joseph at Cupertino. I understand him a lot. I have more stories, like the fact that my dyspraxia and my autism, my short-term memory is practically non-existent. So I forgive very easily, because I don't remember. I've had people the same day they do the thing that supposedly hurt me, within a couple of hours, they're coming to me and apologizing, and I have no idea what they're talking about. Well, for years I had lamented my short-term memory being an issue. One day I was at work. Randomly, this thought hit me that I'm not actually, I thought I was broken because of my short-term memory, and I just had this sense of, you're not broken. I specifically designed you to forgive easily, to show how it could be done. And I'm like, whoa. I nearly cried. I had to sit down. I was standing up at work. I had to sit down for a little while. I was just so, whoa. Because when you go through a good chunk of your life thinking you're broken and disordered for this reason, and then you realize, oh, wait, no, I'm made for this. Well, and you realize why, it's amazing. It boggles the brain. So the church has helped me, and my faith has helped me come into my own as a person on the spectrum and as someone with dyspraxia. It has helped me live into that. And my faith has helped that. My dyspraxia and my autism have helped shape my faith in the same way that my faith has helped shape how I live with those. So that is this week's video. Next week, we'll learn about a couple of other famous people, maybe some more, but at least a couple who were dyspraxic. One is a wizard, and one is a woman with a fantastic musical machine. Thanks for stopping by the Loft this week, and I'll see you next time.